It was a boring Saturday night, just after a city celebration called Crazy Water Festival, where it had rained all day. The festival was held in the city park, and everyone had gone home, as it was late at night. I was riding around town with a friend of mine. We were cruising through the park, where we found one booth where someone had taken a large hot pink parachute and hung it over their booth to protect them from the rain. My friend and I were avid water skiers and had been wanting a parachute so we could try to paraski behind his boat. We saw this as our opportunity. Neither of us were thieves and both rationalized that if someone wanted it they wouldn't have left it out in the rain, so we decided to make it ours. The first problem was that the chute was tied off at the top of a large post oak tree. And one of us had to climb up and cut a string which was looped over a very small limb about 25 to 30 feet from the ground. I volunteered, and with Bowie knife in back pocket ascended up the large tree. Once I reached near the top of the tree, I shimmied out upon a very small limb, feeling very vulnerable and a bit scared. I reached out with the knife and cut the nylon cord, setting the chute free. I watched it blossom out as it fell to the ground, then witnessed my buddy quickly picking it up. I then found that I couldn't quite get back to the trunk of the tree. I felt very uneasy, so I slightly turned and swung my arm back to try to catch a tree limb, but there wasn't one. I lost my balance and began to fall back. In an instant, I was terrified, as I was aware that I was falling, and was very doubtful that the distance would be survivable. Everything stopped as I awaited the impact of my body to the ground, yet it never came. I was instantly, and I mean instantly, removed. I found myself in a dark space or a void of some kind. My mind reeled with uncertainty, trying to assess where I was. That is when I began to see my young life suddenly displayed in my mind as if on a picture screen. It then faded away and I was in the dark again, when I became aware of a light in the distance. It was small at first but gradually got closer. The closer it got the more radiant it became, and the less fear and dread I felt. The light embraced me, as if it consumed me. It was then I realized that I no longer had the stress of a body. My lungs no longer had to work my intercostal muscles to breath. And my heart no longer had to work to pump life-sustaining blood to my organs. I was free of the body and the daily stress of a physical existence. I no longer felt fear or loneliness, or emotional pain. There are no human words available to describe this. It was a total immersion in God's love, in His light. As if in the presence of Christ Himself, immersed in the Holy Spirit. I could see, but not with my eyes, hear but not with my ears, and so on. It was the most beautiful thing that I have ever experienced in my life, before or since. It was not physical. It was 100% spiritual. As this was going on I had no sadness, nor did I miss anyone or anything I was leaving behind. It was as if I was also immersed in total understanding and knowledge of all things. There was no concept of time and space, only pure love and infinite wisdom, untold forgiveness and acceptance. Yet somehow, I knew, though no words were spoken, that I had to return. I did not want to, but was not given a choice. Then the light began to separate and fade. That is when the feelings of dread and the stress of life began to re-enter my mind as I re-entered my earthly body. I began to come to. I was sitting in a car at my house. I wasn't sure where I was at first, but then things began to make sense. I looked at my friend and then at a pack of cigarettes on the dashboard. I then distinctly remember saying, "I don't know who you are or who I am, but I do remember I need a cigarette." And with that I reached up, got a smoke and lit it up. I looked at him again and asked, "What happened?" He looked at me with frustration and said, "For the 50th time, you fell out of a tree." I did not go to a doctor until the following day because of a severe headache and body aches. I felt very, very bad. The doctor told me I had a concussion and proceeded to chew on me for not calling an ambulance. My buddy told me that he had taken the parachute and stuffed it into the trunk of his car, located about 30 feet from the tree. He said he heard a thud, and found me lying on my back with one knee in the air. He said my eyes were slightly open but I was not breathing. He had tried to wake me but couldn't and thought I was dead, given the height of the fall. He then didn't know what to do as we were nowhere near a phone. This was 1979, mind you. CPR was virtually unknown, but my buddy had seen doctors on TV take their fists and pound someone on the chest to get their heart beating again, so with the crudeness of an idiot, that is exactly what he did. On the third one, I began to cough and roll over. He said that is when I started to breath heavily and cough more. After a few minutes, he said I rolled over and began to ask what happened. After about 30 minutes, he helped me up and to the car, where I told him to just take me home. I don't remember any of this to this day. He said he got me in the car and drove around a bit to get some air, and then drove out to my house about 4 miles south of town. He said I kept asking, what happened, the hallmark of a concussion or subdural hematoma. This is when I began to regain my consciousness. I never told anyone of my experience, but the height of the fall was between 25 and 30 feet. I still don't remember any of it. A few years had gone by and I was visiting my brother-in-law one night and told him of the experience. He went to his library and brought back a book he had read. That was published in the late 1800s in England with hundreds of documented cases that sounded just like mine. I was amazed. Since then I have played this all back in my mind a million times, and have no explanation other than the possibility that I had died.